Yes. Crazy beans, crazy business. Good morning, or whatever time of day it is where you are. I am. This is a rare Sunday morning live for me from my living room. Wish I could get these cameras closer together. I'm talking to two cameras at the same time. If it seems like I'm not paying attention, not exactly true. Um, just thought I would get up. I was doing a live last night, and what got interrupted. I had to stop in the middle of it, which was a little weird for me. But I figured I'm up. I'll do another live this morning, and I want to talk about. I was talking about sort of altered states and different realities and things like that last night. So um, this morning, I'll talk about something sort of along those same lines. I'm going to talk about what we call UPG, or Unverified Personal Gnosis. Gnosis with a G, I know, Gnosis. It's a Greek word. It's where we get the word know, knowledge, that sort of thing from, even though we spell it with a K. So I thought I would talk about that a little bit this morning, and sort of what is good morning to you. Yeah, this is definitely not my usual time or day or anything, but very nice to see you. Per usual, the first person to wish me good morning when I go live. So I thought I would talk a little bit about. I got interrupted in a live yesterday, and I had to stop in the middle of it. Somebody, people came to my house unexpectedly, and had to stop. And so I thought I would go live this morning, have some coffee with y'all, and talk about unverified personal gnosis, what that is, why is it important. Now, the funny thing is, in a lot of communities, particularly, I don't know where this term originated, to be honest with you, unverified personal gnosis, UPG. But it was used as a pejorative. It was used for the longest time. It was used as a way to put put people's experiences down from a certain perspective, right? So let's say that I'm, and I saw it a lot in sort of the neo-pagan community and that sort of thing. But let's say I'm trying to, reconstruct Norse-based religious practices. And we don't know what those were necessarily, with 100% certainty, because all of the writings, or most of the source material we have, the Eddas, things like that, come from Christian writers. So I go into meditation and I get a visitation from Odin or whoever, and it says, this is how I should be worshipped. And I go and I write a book about it. And I say, this is how Odin wants to be worshipped in this, neo-pagan way. And this is tradition, whatever. Oh, thank you. Nice to see you. Thank you for tuning in. I just started, so you are right on time. So anyway, I have this personal experience, and I go, hey, this is it. I have figured all of this out. And so people would say, that's just UPG, unverified personal gnosis, meaning you have had, I'll talk about what gnosis is in a moment, but you've had an experience of knowledge, and that is meaningless because it's unverified. It doesn't match to anything in the history and the Eddas and the, in the whatever. So it was a way to sort of put down those those experiences as not having worth, that sort of thing. Right? However, when you look at a lot of the spiritual scripture writing, doctrine, that sort of thing, no matter what the tradition, it's basically all unverified personal gnosis, right? Even the books of the Bible, the visions of Revelation, and even the Gospels and things like that were written by people. I mean, yeah, there were stories passed on. There were a lot of oral stories written down, but there is a lot of UPG found in many spiritual traditions. Does it make it invalid? I don't know. I don't think so. And so I want to let's take reality apart a little bit. You and I and every other individualized consciousness that exists is having a completely different experience of reality right now. We Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for the gifts. I appreciate it. Um, we do not have the same experience of reality. I Let's take, you and I, for example. We have completely different biology, right? We have similarities in biology, but we have different DNA. My body is very different than many other people's bodies. I don't have, I have a missing limb for one thing. Um, but my eyes are different, my eyesight's different, my hearing is different. So just biologically, we're different. That's one thing. That's one aspect of how, and a lot of my reality, a lot of your reality is processed through your biology, your sensory organs, right? And you don't know if they're different or not. However, the sensory organs are only one small part of perception of reality of what's going on. As this information comes in, whether it's coming in externally, from internal or whatever, um, you have your unique biology, but then you have your completely unique set of experiences, your memories, your upbringing, your education, the media you have consumed, the language that you speak, right? All of these things have huge differences, and all of our experiences arise in the context of that individual. For most of us, for most of the time, for most of us, all of that experience arises as not pure experience, um, but it is all filtered through all of these things. And that's what we're here to do. That's what we've incarnated to do. We've incarnated to have these experiences, right? To have these individualized experiences. And to me, that's a beautiful thing. It's a scary thing from one perspective, in that we can never truly understand another person's reality, not 100%, right? And I have, I've told this story a couple times, but that I have a student I was meeting with the other a couple weeks ago, and she's like, "Oh, how things going?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm changing jobs, and my parents are freaked out, and I don't get it. I don't get why they don't understand that this is a good thing, and whatever." And I said, "Well, you know, maybe there's nothing to understand. It's just that they're living in a different reality than you are, right? They're from a different generation. They were raised by different parents. They had a different education. They were exposed to different media. They have different biology. All of these things are different for them. So expecting them to have the same view of reality that you do is somewhat unreasonable." All right, and blocked. Okay. Wow, there's a lot of, like, particularly on TikTok, there's a lot of like spammers and stuff like that who come on. So I think if we understood that every individualized consciousness that we are, has a completely different experience of reality, our own reality, we live in our own reality, I think that would make our lives easier, because we spend so much time frustrated that other people don't see things from our perspective. We spend so much time frustrated that, how could you believe this, because this is the truth, right? We spend so much time frustrated because we think our beliefs are truth with a capital T. We think our truth is the truth, right? When in fact there are many truths, many perspectives, infinite paradigms for all intents and purposes. There are infinite perspectives available in the universe. Um, some spiritual practice helps with this. Some spiritual practice allows you to merge with spiritual, in shamanism, we merge with our helping spirits quite a bit. And that can, I mean, my main upper world helping spirit is female, for example. And when I merge with her, I have the experience of having a female body even though she's a spirit, for that period of time. That, as a, cisgendered male in this society, that is an interesting thing. That is a big shift in perspective for me, right? I don't have that experience in a sort of way. So is it then spirit is above religion? Each spiritual experience is truth. Each connection is a UPG. So I think personal connections are 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 basically, most of them are UPG. Sometimes we can have experiences that we share with others that seem to be common, right? And um, that seem to reinforce other people's beliefs. And then it's not really, at that point, it's not really necessarily an unverified experience. So, but let me talk about that a little bit. Um, Religion is codified spirituality, right? It's normally there's a doctrine, right? Some sort of writings, or at least oral traditions passed down, right? There's usually some kind of structure, right? There may be sacred buildings or sacred sites or that sort of thing. There's usually dogma. There is behavior. There's that limitations on behavior. This is okay. That's not okay. That's beyond legal restrictions, right? Obviously, in society, we say you can't murder other people. You can't steal from other people. We have those kinds of rules in society, whether religion is present or not. But religion will have other dogmas, right? It's against the will of God to work on the Sabbath. It's against the will of God to eat shellfish or pork, or whatever. There'll be other restrictions that are beyond sort of civil society type restrictions. And so those things tend to be codified in a religion, where spirituality can be without religion. They're, in fact, the fastest growing segment when they take censuses in most places, particularly in the Western world. The fastest growing group of people identifies as spiritual but not religious, meaning not affiliated with any particular religion, but having spiritual belief, that sort of thing. That's the fastest growing segment. This places renewed importance on UPG, right? Because if we're not out there getting being taught, being told what things mean, it's up to us to make meaning of our experiences. It's up to us to make meaning of our experiences anyway. But this places sort of extra importance on that. Now, where unverified personal gnosis is problematic is when I expect my truth, and I just sort of was talking about this, but where I expect my truth to be your truth. I get information from spirit that says every Tuesday at noon, I should place a pebble outside my front door. And I go, oh, well, everybody needs to do that. This is the way that everybody needs to behave. This is how it has to be. Well, then I'm starting to form religion around my own personal experience, right? I'm starting to form dogma for other people around my personal experience. I realize that's the way of the world, but and it might make sense for you, right? So I come in here and talk about my personal experiences a lot. It is a hard thing to realize. Yeah, it's a hard thing to realize that my personal experience is not your personal experience. But realizing that, taking that in and understanding that, I think is one key to happiness in this world. Or at least it's a key to undoing lots of unhappiness in this world. There's lots of unhappiness around this person disagrees with me. Okay, it's cool. What if we go, this person disagrees with me? That's okay. They have a different experience of reality than I do. I don't necessarily have to convince them of my truth. And yeah, I'm on here I'm on here spouting my truth, but I always say you don't have to believe anything. In fact, I don't recommend just taking everything I say as capital T truth. Um, I, I can only present my perspective on things. Yeah, being self-aware, we're all different, learning and accepting and having compassion. Right, absolutely. Compassion is a real key. Compassion is strength, right? There is a segment of the patriarchy that believes that compassion is weakness. And that doesn't make sense to me, right? Because how, if I'm in a position of weakness, how can I be compassionate, right? I'm under threat. I'm behaving as if I'm under threat all the time. That's a position of weakness, right? And a position of strength is to act with compassion, meaning I am not threatened by treating human beings as if they're deserving of kindness. Yes, yes. Compassion is absolute strength. It's a sure sign of strength to see compassion. And I see beautiful displays of compassion around me all the time, coming from all sectors, all walks of life. It's not, I see compassion when somebody fosters a pet, a rescued pet. I see compassion when somebody helps a child, or when somebody gives to charity, or when somebody, there is so much compassion around us. Um, so I see it all. I see it all the time. It goes unrecognized a lot, but there is a lot of compassion in my opinion. So, I make it very clear. I'm out here talking that this is my perspective, and if it makes sense to you, that's great. And if it doesn't make sense to you, that's great too. If you can reject everything I say, and I will not be personally offended by that. I've watched you all grow tremendously, and that's a great thing. People who would never meet are, I don't know what that is. Um, I don't know what that means, but I think that's probably a good, a positive message of some sort. Um, yeah. So again, all I can present is my perspective. It's the only one I have. Yes, when I do shamanic work, I try to get into um, other perspectives, and making the attempt to take on other people's perspectives, I think is a very healthy thing to do. Um, we have expressions like walk a mile in somebody else's shoes, right? Um, and there are there are some cognitive biases, I think, that cause people to come across as cruel because they don't understand that what they're expressing is a bias. And one is called the fundamental attribution error. And that is when we see bad things happening to other people, and particularly people that we see as unlike ourselves, people who are not in a group we identify with, right? So other races, other religions, other, whatever. I'm not saying everybody does this. This is just a tendency. It's a cognitive bias that many people have. We attribute the bad things that happen to them to them as a character flaw, right? This happened to you because you're a bad person. That's the essential idea. When bad things happen to us, we are the victim of circumstance, right? How could those things be true? How could those things always be true, right? When bad things happen to me, it's not my fault. When bad things happen to you, it's your fault. That's fundamental attribution error. And people do have that to some extent. And some people have that to a tremendous extent, right? When I look at people as being complex systems that involve their biology, that involve their upbringing, that involve their environment, that involve their culture, their language, their education, all of these things. We're really, really complex. Do I think that jealous people should be humbled? I don't know what that I don't necessarily know what that means. And I don't necessarily have an opinion on that. I think lots of people are jealous for lots of different reasons. I think jealousy comes fundamentally from a my cat's like about to unplug my laptop here. Um, I think here's Phoebe. She wants to say hello to everybody this morning. Hello. Um, I would rather view jealous people with compassion than wanting to see somebody humbled. I don't want to see anybody humbled. I don't know specifically what you mean by that, but um I don't want to see people suffer. Yeah, she's a sweetie. She is a sweetheart. She always likes to jump up in my lap when I'm going live and get involved in the action and get pats, and she's a lovey cat. Um and she was a rescue. She was a rescue kitty that we adopted. So is my dog. Um So Phoebe, queen of the cats, queen of the house, she rules the house, but in a loving way. She's not mean. She doesn't ever bite or scratch or anything. She's such a sweetheart. Look at her. Look at that face. Um yeah, I reassure her and I give her yeah, she's a jealous girl. I reassure her and give her love. Very often when we deal with jealousy, we're dealing with jealousy in relationships, right? And jealousy in a relationship comes from a place of insecure attachment, right? I think, um, uh, try not to tell too many personal stories that involve other people, but it's kind of weird to me. I'm not a jealous person, so I don't necessarily understand jealousy that much. Um, you know, uh, and I've had situations where I would have had a right to be jealous. I've been in relationships where I've been cheated on. I've been in relationships that fell apart. All kinds of things, right? Personal relationships. We're talking about sometimes personal relationships. The other thing people get jealous of is when we see others who we see as more fortunate than ourselves as being rewarded. And again, that's coming from a place of insecurity, a lack of esteem. Why uh, so when I think of like humbling somebody, I thinks of like, oh, you're jealous, I'm going to make you feel worse about yourself. That doesn't really make sense to me. And maybe we don't mean it in that context, but yeah, you can, so being sure of yourself is one way to have a lack of jealousy, but also um, like becoming less, not less caring, that's not the right word for it, but being able to let things go, being able to not be attached to whatever including people, right? We confuse love and attachment very often, and those are not the same thing. Wanting to control somebody else is not love. Wanting to control what they do, wanting to control, their lives, their aspects, that is not love, right? And you think about like, I've got kids. My kids are about to go off to college. I'm about to become an empty nester very shortly, having some emotions about that. Um, I don't want to control their lives. I want them to live their lives. I want them to have as much control of their lives as possible. And I always have. Now, as a parent, there are times in a child's life where you have to place boundaries around their behavior for their own good because they don't yet have the experience or the safety and that sort of thing. You have to be safe. You have to make sure your kids are safe. You have to, you want to raise them to be polite or whatever, but wanting to control them, wanting to control their decisions, wanting them to not experience the natural repercussions of their actions. You don't let your kids. I remember, and not to like, I am not bashing an ex ever on here, but when I was married to their mom and they were little and we lived in the city, we would have to take them to the park to play outside. So we take them to the park and they would want to just run and run and run. And their mom was really nervous about them running around. She's like, "Oh, they shouldn't run," and I'm like, "Why? Why shouldn't they run?" "Well, because they're gonna fall." And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, they will. They'll fall down. They'll be okay. It might hurt a little bit, but they're gonna be okay. And we're gonna love them if they fall and they start crying. We're gonna pick them up and give them love and teach them that they're okay." But you can't like that level of controlling and it's coming from a place of love. Like, I want to protect this child, right? They're not going to learn to navigate in the world if you are a helicopter parent, if you're that, that sort of thing. So I don't want to control them because I love them. I want them to grow. I want them to make amazing decisions. My kids are wonderful. I have wonderful children. I'm not, not to brag. I'm bragging for sure. I have wonderful kids. They're both going off to college to become nurses. They want to work with children. They're so loving. They're so kind. They're so compassionate. One of my daughters was a camp counselor over the summer for little kids, like kids between kindergarten and first grade, and absolutely loved that. And she had just a fantastic experience. She was so sad when camp was over, and just loved her little campers and stuff. They're just wonderful, compassionate kids. Let's see. To act intelligently in human affairs is only possible, and if an attempt is made to understand the thoughts, motives, and apprehensions of one's opponents so fully that one can see the world through their eyes. Albert Einstein. Yeah, I mean, and that is a hard thing, right? Yeah, they're both of my daughters are sweethearts. They're both they love kids, they love animals, they love each other, they love their friends, they love their family. It's just been an amazing thing to see them grow and grow up and grow into the women that they have become, right? Um but it can be really challenging to see the world through another person's eyes to any degree. Like, we can understand some things about human nature, um, but that can always throw us for a loop as well. And one of the things, how old am I? I'm 52, 52 years young. I should have asked how old you think I am before before answering, but I'm 52. 52 and a half, actually. Yeah, yeah, almost exactly 52 and a half. My birthday's in February. I'm a Pisces. Can you tell? I'm very sensitive. Um, but human beings can always throw us for a loop. We all have our stuff. We all have our wounds, our trauma. We all have our, all of these things. And the other aspect is we can have compassion even for those people who you're 36, or you thought I was 36? If you thought I was 36, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I would have had to have had my daughters very young if I was 36. I mean, it's possible, but oh, you thought I was 36? Thank you. I don't know if the you can see the white in my beard, but oh, you're 33. You're definitely much younger than I am. It's interesting. I've been most recently I've been dating somebody who is 9 years younger than I am, and we still have a lot in common, but we are essentially from different generations. And so when we talk about stuff, oh, when I was a kid, there's a lot of stuff that's really different. There's a lot of really different stuff we talk about when I was a kid. But I love, like, I realize, like, I sound like my grandparents when I talk like this, when I talk to my children, and I talk about things like, oh, when I was a kid, we didn't have cell phones, and if we had to make a call, you had to have change in your pockets and find a payphone somewhere. And they're like, that's so weird. That's so weird. And I remember when they were little, we took them to Disney World, and we were at Epcot Center, and there's a place in Epcot Center that's sort of between the front of the park that has all the futuristic stuff, and then there's the back of the park that has the world showcase with all the different countries in it, which is my favorite part. one of my favorite parts of Disney World, is the World Showcase. I love going from country to country. And so we were on our way there, and we had to use the bathroom. And there's this building that's not used for much. It's got like a first aid station and stuff like that in it, but there are bathrooms in there. So we took them into the bathroom, and there was a bank of payphones on the wall because it's an older building. And so the girls came out from the bathroom, and I was standing by the payphones. I go, "Hey, look, girls, payphones." And they were like, "What's a payphone?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's right." I don't know if my daughters have ever seen a phone book, right? I don't know if my daughters have ever seen, um, hi to you. Um, it's so strange to me, stuff that was like really normal. One of my daughters is really into vinyl albums, which I think is interesting. And she's got like Fleetwood Mac on there, which is even older than I am. Uh, but it's kind of cool that she's into that stuff. I credit myself. I don't know if I'm fully responsible for my daughter's eclectic tastes in music. They do listen to Taylor Swift and Harry Styles, but we used to listen to a lot of stuff in the car and stuff from different generation. What would you wouldn't want your daughters to think about that? Z2 satanic art. Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. That's that nutty right wing weird stuff. Um yeah, I just block that stuff. Um I don't think somebody who sings about their breakups is, teaching the kids to worship the devil or whatever. That's just crazy conspiracy theory stuff. But again, like that's not even somebody's. So here's a thing, right? So that's not even somebody's UPG. Do I want a little secret Ukrainian girlfriend? I don't, but thank you for the offer. What is going on in here? Oh man, I'm usually not on at this time on a Sunday morning, but there's some really strange comments coming up between Harry Styles and Taylor Swift being satanic, and somebody I don't know if that was an offer or clearly it's going to be spam though. Somebody saying, "Do you want a cute little secret Ukrainian girlfriend?" Thank you, but no. I'm all set. I don't think I would be keen on not that I'm not keen on Ukrainian women, but getting whatever that was, whatever attempt at spam or whatever that was. What a funny thing to come up. I never cease to be amused and amazed at what comes up in social media. That's so funny. You are not spam. Yeah. Well, whatever it is that's going on, nobody's going to come on and say. In fact, actually, this is the second time somebody's come on one of my lives and asked if I wanted a secret Ukrainian girlfriend. So there is some sort of scam going on. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but right, the devil gets blamed for everything, and so that's a really good point. And oh, it was you. Oh, so you asked me twice, and I've said no twice, but thank you. Um, uh, yeah, so this is a really important point that you made, that the devil gets blamed for everything, right? When we have this expression in English, the devil made me do it. I went crazy. I got reactive. I did something stupid or violent or whatever that was outside of my normal character. And for much of history, human history, in English anyway, I don't know if this expression is in other languages as well, we'll say the devil made me do it, right? I'm going to blame an outside actor, right? A supernatural outside actor for my personal behavior, right? Devil made me do it. Or we talk about having our demons, right? I'm fighting with my demons. when we say that, we are talking about parts of ourself. We're talking about parts of our, our own internal processes, our demons. There is the word demon, which comes from daemon in Greek, which means spirit, and then had been like sort of co-opted by Christianity to turn, many foreign deities like Pazuzu and Baal and all of these, a lot of these Sumerian, Mesopotamian gods and goddesses and stuff into evil creatures that fell from heaven and whatever. Um, but when we're talking about somebody's fighting with their demons, we're talking about they're fighting with their wounded parts that are inside of them. And there is a practice that comes from, I think, Tibetan Buddhism called chod, which is this type of shadow work that we do where we are not confronting in a combative way, but confronting our inner demons. Oh, thank you so much for the rose. I appreciate it. Uh, I appreciate everybody who's here. I appreciate all of you. But there's this part where we're like, I've got some stuff going on, right? And that is due to something that's inside of me. And I can externalize that as a demon, or I can sort of say, oh, this is a part of me that's acting up. Oh, I appreciate you as well. Thank you so much. That's very thoughtful. I'm going to give you a follow back too. I don't know if you might have a private TikTok, so you might see a follow request from me anyway. So there's sorry, I lost my train of thought. It happens a lot, particularly this early in the morning. I don't have a full cup of coffee in me yet. I drink my coffee slowly. It's all right. It's part of my morning ritual. So anyway, there's this practice where we externalize. We know it's from inside of us, but we externalize this demon, right? This part of us that's acting up, this part of us that's reactive, this part of us that's acting hateful or depressed or sad, whatever it is. And we have a conversation with it and we come to an agreement and we feed it. We give it food because it is hurting, it's lacking, right? It needs something. And this is an important thing to understand. The parts of us that are wounded, the parts of us that act up when we get triggered. You're still up from last night. Holy smokes. Where are you? Where in the world are you? Like what time zone? Could be really late or could be really early, depending on where you are. You're in Indiana, so you're in Eastern time. Is that Eastern time zone? I think that's Eastern time zone, right? Yeah. So we're in the same time zone. Yep. I'm on the East Coast. I'm up in Maine, in the Pine Tree State, otherwise known as Vacation Land. It's only vacation land if you don't live here. Although, it is still, even if you live here, it's a beautiful place to vacation. Or you can staycation. So anyway, these parts of you that act up, like these parts of you that become reactive, these parts of you that that are challenging. An important thing to consider is that they all have a positive intention for you. Oh, you're in Georgia. Yeah, I bet it's hot there. We had some weather here over the summer where it was hotter here than it was my mother lives in South Carolina, and it was hotter here than where she was. But it will not be in the 90s here today. I think it's only going to be in the low 70s here today, which is delightful, particularly because I have to do some yard work today. So I don't like doing yard work when it's 90s out. I will, but I don't, I don't love it, and it slows me down. So these parts of us that we sometimes don't like because they act up, Why do I always get so angry when this happens? Or why does this make me so sad? They have a, they have, sorry, I'm trying to let your comments through, but, I'm a cop and I got shot, so watching TikTok. Oh, well, I'm very sorry that that happened, and I hope that you are recovering well. Um, so anyway, these parts of us that make us act up, they are I'm trying to follow a train of thought here. I'm very easily distracted this morning, not enough coffee in my system. I've got ADHD, and coffee actually helps me concentrate. Sounds weird, right? Like, why would somebody with um yeah, I hope you're okay too. Um Very easily distracted, but coffee helps, which is an interesting thing. So, it's like a child, right? If you have children, children, children will throw a tantrum, right? And the a child throwing a tantrum is not trying to just cause consternation. That's not it. The child isn't evil who's throwing a tantrum. It might feel that way sometimes, right? Child is not evil. The child wants something. The child has an intention that it's not getting, whether that's attention or the child is hungry or whatever it is. Whatever it is that the child wants, they're throwing a tantrum. Now, you don't necessarily want to reward that behavior. You want to teach children to use their words to ask for what they want, to talk about it, that sort of thing. 2 broken ribs. Oh my gosh, yes. Thank God for your vest. Um, I'm so glad that you're okay. So happy that you're okay and that you're able to recover. Hopefully it's a short recovery for you. And might I say that I appreciate your service. I appreciate everybody. I realize that's something we say to military personnel, but I do appreciate law enforcement, first responders, all those people who are out there um, keeping us safe and sometimes putting themselves in the line of fire as well. And I'm glad that you're recovering and that you're okay. And I appreciate you. Um, so anyway, this child who's acting out, this child who's throwing a tantrum, whatever, they're trying to get something that they need or that they want. There's a positive intention behind the bad behavior. The same is true for people who have addiction, right? The addiction stems usually from trauma or wounding, but sometimes it's purely chemical. But they're trying to get this dopamine hit or this. They're trying to feel okay, even though it's negative behavior that is actually harmful. The intention behind it is 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 good, and that is normally very, very rarely are there people out there that are just doing evil for the sake of evil, just doing harm for the sake of doing harm, or taking. There are people who take pleasure in doing harm to others. I get that. There's still a positive intention there, even though the behavior is harmful and we would see it potentially as evil. There's still a positive intention, the intention for them to, they get some pleasure out of it, they get something from it, right? We don't do stuff that, it generally speaking, that we don't get anything from, whether, and again, that doesn't make the behavior necessarily okay. So when we have an experience that we're like, oh, that's not like me, why did I get so angry, or why did I get so depressed, or why did this happen, why did I shout at that person who cut me off in traffic, why did I lose my cool, why did I get triggered, there is a positive intention there. We don't necessarily know what it is. It could take some internal work. It takes some internal work, introspection, some self-awareness to figure out what that is. What is that? What is it that this part of me wants? Right? Um, what is it that's getting triggered here? So in a relationships are really good mirrors, right? Oh, you're drinking decaf? I don't. I'm not drinking decaf. I am uploading. I am uploading. So in the IT world, I'm saying I'm uploading Java into my system. Um, that's a really bad computer joke, folks. Terrible. If you don't understand it, that's fine. Um, I don't have time in my life to care why they're doing it. Sure. I mean that can be true. I'm just saying um, that's the case, right? I'm not saying you have to necessarily understand why people behave the way they do, but that is the case. And what I'm really getting at is understanding why we do the things that we do. Very often we act in ways that don't seem to be in our own self-interest. Um, Very often we become reactive, for example. Triggers, which, a lot of people use being triggered as a way to sort of like make fun of people or whatever. Um, but it, everybody has triggers. Everybody has things that cause a disproportionate emotional reaction, whether that reaction is anger or sad or whatever. Yeah, you taught for 42 years. Wow, that's amazing. My mom was a school teacher. My grandmother was a school teacher. I don't think my mom ever lost her cool, which was amazing because she taught kids from a fairly rough neighborhood and had some harrowing experiences sometimes, and other teachers as well in her school system. Um, oh gosh, thank you. I like the way you said that. I heard the same sentiment before, but it sunk in a little different this morning. Thanks for saying that. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm saying anything earth shattering here, right? I'm not saying something that other people haven't said before, but sometimes hearing the same information in a slightly different way can help it sink in differently, right? When I used to teach a lot of classes and I would teach with a partner. And the partner that I taught with was very matter of fact. This is how this is, right? And the way that I would teach would be like, it's like this. And I would describe a metaphor. So some people, I don't know if it was half or whatever, but like some of the class would like get what she was saying immediately. And then some of them would be sort of like mulling it about. And then I would say it in a slightly different way or use a metaphor. And they would go, oh yeah, yeah, right. So having that expression sometimes, and I do try when I talk about different topics, I try to present them using different perspectives, different metaphors, different stories, that sort of thing. Yeah. Yeah. So we all have different learning styles. We all have different ways that we learn. And so I understand that I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and I am okay with that. And that is, going along with this UPG, right? Somebody might listen to something I say and go, "Oh, that's complete junk." Like, I have no, like, that makes no sense to me whatsoever, right? Because I'm presenting something from my perspective, from the things that I've learned and experienced. Um, and let's talk about the word gnosis for a moment. It's primarily used in spiritual context, but I think it can be more than that. Oh, thank you so much. That is quite. I'm blushing a little bit. No cis gnosis. Oh, yes, gnosis. Sorry. It's spelled with a G. Gnosis. It's a Greek word, and it basically means knowledge, but it implies knowledge from experience. Right? I've had an experience, and there was a group of early Christians, very early Christians, because they were mostly wiped out by other Christians, called the Gnostics, and we mostly know about them because of recovered texts, things like the Dead Sea Scrolls, um, and other, some other texts that have been recovered because they were killed out. Yes, Gnosis. That's exactly it. Gnosis. Yeah, gnosis. Um, it's where we get the word knowledge from. Anyway, um, so we have tech, but so their idea was about personal revelation, right? Which, if you think about the early mainstream Christian church, they were Romans, and they were, like from the fourth century on, they were Romans, militaristic, very patriarchal, very structured militaristic society. There was ranking, all of these things. And so the idea that an individual could receive divine inspiration, could receive divine knowledge, could receive, through prayer, meditation, ritual, that sort of thing, was anathema to the early knowledge with a G. Yeah, I like that. So that was stamped out very early on. And there are people who have revived Gnostic practice, the Gnostic religions. There were different, and Gnostics is a descriptor. It wasn't like a group of people. There were many different groups. There were many different competing Christian churches in the early days, until it was codified by the Romans in the fourth century, right? Until they're like, this is the Bible. All the other books get thrown in the pile and burned. And if you're not using our book and bowing to our priests and doing this, we're coming in. They actually killed a third of the population of southern France. The very first crusade was not to kick Muslims out of Jerusalem. It was to wipe out the heretics, the people who were Christians, but not the Christians the way we wanted them to be. And it's called the Albigensian Crusade. It was the very first crusade. And basically genocide, killed a third of the population of southern France, who were in fact Christian, just not the same Christian. And it's where we get the phrase "kill them all and let God sort them out." When the story is, when they were going in to wipe out the people, they were like, "How do we know who's who?" Because everybody, it's not like we're going to wipe out the Muslims who dress differently and look different and speak a different language. These are people who speak the same language, dress the same, whatever. How do we know who to wipe out? And the answer was, kill everybody, and God will sort them, meaning God will pull up to heaven the people that are righteous because they believe the way that we believe. So anyway, these Gnostics believed in personal revelation. And so that was an important aspect of that belief. And that's where we get UPG from, Unverified Personal Gnosis, meaning personal revelation. When you do your own spiritual work, meaning whatever that is for you, prayer or meditation, particularly when you are using consciousness as a tool to explore your spirituality, whether that's through meditation or shamanic journeying or what have you, you are going to get personal revelation. You're going to get personal insight. Whether that applies to anybody else, I don't know. I can't tell you that, right? So when I do work on behalf of a client, for example, and I get information from spirit, we'll say, that's who I assume it's coming from, and I deliver to them, I don't know if it's going to make any sense whatsoever. I'm just the messenger. Here's information that I got. More times than not, it is meaningful to the person I'm delivering it to. Sometimes it's meaningless to me, right? I'll give an example. And to be really careful, I don't ever give any identifying client information away. I don't talk about who my clients are. But we'll say that this client, this was a client I was working with from Scandinavia. That's as much as I'll say about who this person is. I was working with this client from Scandinavia, and I got a vision of turtles swimming around this person. Um, and I said to this person, I'm getting a vision of turtles swimming around you. Like, I don't know if that makes any sense to you whatsoever. And um, there was more information than that. And this client revealed to me that their grandmother collected turtles, even had pet turtles, which is apparently really unusual in Scandinavia to have pet turtles or collect turtles, and that her grandmother had passed not that long ago, and she felt like she was getting a message from her grandmother, and all of these things. Well, I give you a reading. I don't really do readings per se. What I work with people in, I do healing sessions for people, and part of that is that I'm doing divinatory work for them. So, but if that's something you're interested in, you can go to my website and contact me, and I would be happy to talk to you about that. Happy to discuss whether it makes sense for you or not. Um, yeah, I don't do like psychic readings per se or that sort of thing, but happy to chat with you about it for sure. Um, so anyway, so this was personal gnosis. This was something that I experienced, that I saw in my work, and I delivered it to her, and it made no sense to me. Like, I had no idea what the meaning was, and that's very often how it works in shamanism. Like, I don't know the meaning. My teacher, my shamanic teacher, who's a brilliant teacher, she's retired from teaching now, but I don't even know if she's taking on new clients anymore. I think she's still working and she's writing her memoirs. She's an elder now. Oh, hello. Welcome. Nice to see you. Nice to see you this morning. Um, she told this great story about she had a client who came to her that had like carpal tunnel syndrome, and in her journey for this person, she saw chickens pecking at the ground, and then she saw a weird like rolling pin, and she's like, I have no idea what this means. And so she came back and told the guy, like, I don't know what this means, but I saw chickens pecking on the ground. And he goes, oh my gosh, my wife told me that I'm getting carpal tunnel because I peck when I type on the computer. Like, I'm a hunt and peck guy, and I'm pecking like a chicken. And that is the cause. And she thinks that's the cause of my carpal tunnel. And then she bought me this rolling thing that's magnetic, that I'm supposed to roll over the area that's supposed to cause some healing. So again, it was information that didn't necessarily make sense to her, that's coming from somewhere that but made sense to the client, and that's often how it comes up in shamanic work when I'm working for somebody else. When I'm doing my own work, it's different. The information I get is pertinent to me. Sometimes it makes sense and sometimes it doesn't. What are you going to do? Sometimes and for me, when I work with so shamans always work with helping spirits. When I work with helping spirits, they're all different. They all have completely different personalities. They have different things they work on. Frequently, I'll know, like, I'm going to be doing this kind of work. There's all kinds of different things that happen in shamanic practice. Um, uh, that's really weird. Something popped up on my screen. I didn't quite understand. There's all kinds of things that can take place in shamanic practice. Shamanism is like a Swiss Army knife of spiritual tools. There's all kinds of healing tools. There's all kinds of divination tools. I believe that I will be studying shamanism for the rest of my life and never learn 10% of it. It's that deep. It's that deep and it's that wide. And there's shamanism in all different cultures all over the world. So, uh, you could study, I do study Norse shamanism and Celtic shamanism and West African shamanism and Siberian shamanism, South American shamanism. There's all kinds of different blends of, not blends, different types different cultural types of shamanism. So you could do that. So very often when I am doing work, I'll know what work needs to be done that day based on who shows up, which one of my helping spirits shows up. If it's my main ancestral helping spirit, if she happens along, I'm like, okay, there's some like serious juju going on here. She is a very serious spirit. There's no joking around. There's no, that sort of thing. But there are other helping spirits that I work with that are like comedians that make me laugh a lot, even though the work that we're doing is relatively serious, a lot of the time. So, um, yeah. So, anyway, I was talking about unverified personal gnosis. So, if you're doing your own spiritual work and it involves working with consciousness in any way, that could be like what I would consider deep prayer. There's sort of there's prayer where I'm like, dear whoever, whatever deity you're praying to, dear whatever, deliver me from whatever. Or there's this sort of like I go into church and I do the thing and I'm not even really thinking about it. That is not really playing with consciousness too much, right? I mean, there might be a small shift in consciousness, but it's not going to be a major one if what you're doing is perfunctory. If you're just performing prayer because it's what you do, it's the act of what you do. But there are ways to pray that shift conscious. There's metaphysical ways to pray, if prayer is part of your practice. There's also meditation, and I think meditation is part of every spiritual tradition that I'm aware of. There certainly is meditation in Christianity and Judaism, and I'm sure there's Christianity and Islam, particularly the metaphysical arms of Islam. It might not look like meditation. So the Sufis, for example, dance, right? And they spin and go into an altered state. That's definitely one way to do it. And so there are these profound ways to act, to work, to work in prayer and meditation. Shamanic journeying is my preferred method. Actually, I'm wrong. Okay. I'm happy to be wrong. Happy to be wrong. I have no claims to being right. I have just claims to having my own personal experience, which is what I'm presenting. But even like if I'm factually, if I'm speaking about things that I think are facts, I could absolutely be wrong. I am not clung to what I believe to be true so much that I could not be corrected if something I'm speaking of is wrong. So, but you'll find mystical forms of just about every type of spirituality that involve, either prayerful meditation or meditation that uses movement, or meditation that is just meditation. There's deeper forms of meditation. And I can't talk about this too much because I'll get censored, and you'll find the use of psychedelics very often in every tradition that I've looked at, in some form. I'm not saying if you go to church on Sunday that's going to be the experience that you have. I'm talking about like overall larger structures. You'll find smaller esoteric aspects where they're doing deep work in consciousness. Most of the time, the deeper work with consciousness is happening on an esoteric level. By esoteric, the word esoteric means inner circle, means like initiated circle. You're not finding this by going to, Sunday morning church services in most places, that sort of thing. That is what we call exoteric. That's outer circle teaching. And there are esoteric sects in every form. Sects, sects, before anybody confuses what I'm saying. In every major spiritual system. right? Again, you find it in Islam amongst the Sufis. You find it in Christianity. You find esoteric groups, teachings, secret societies, that sort of thing. Um, in certainly in Judaism, with Kabbalah is very esoteric. In fact, traditionally, although you can now, like, you can go take courses in Kabbalah and read books and all kinds of stuff. Traditionally, Kabbalah was only taught to men, and you had to be over 40, and all of your children had to have moved out of the home already before they would start teaching you, for whatever reason. But there were lots of different criteria. I guess there was a certain assumption about your preparation, or your maturity level, or the amount of time that you were going to have to dedicate to learning this stuff. Um, so there's esoteric and exoteric teachings in every major spiritual system. Certainly in Buddhism, um, there are so in Tibetan Buddhism, for example, there are lots and lots of initiations or empowerments that can happen. So you might be able to practice certain practices, but only after you've been through a very specific empowerment, a very specific, which we might consider an initiation. Could be a long, like a multi-day long ceremony with a lama who has um, been uh, been allowed to give this empowerment to you. And then after you have that empowerment, or that, they don't really use the word initiation, but essentially that's what it is. After you've had that, then you can practice this certain set of practices. So, for example, I have done work with the deity Vajrakilaya, um, and Vajrakilaya, I mean, you're technically not supposed to unless you've received the empowerments. And I have not received empowerments, but I've done work in that respect, and it is deep and powerful work. But you have to find somebody. You have to find that would be very challenging to, like, get from a book or something like that. The understanding is really it's progressive. It's something that has to be learned over some period of time, and you have to build up certain ability with visualization. The visualizations are incredibly complex. Is one of the interesting things about Tibetan Buddhism for me is the the mental capacity to get to certain levels with it. The mental capacity to visualize has to be really spot on. You have to be able to, like, most people are familiar with mandalas, right? So the mandalas in Tibetan Buddhism, if you look at them, the sand mandalas, or on a tanka, which is a sacred painting, what you're looking at is a 2D representation of what, when you're in meditation, you're visualizing as 3D. So when you see it, you're in a temple. It is a representation of a temple that you're sitting in, and you imagine the walls and the decorations on the walls, and then you imagine all of the deities and spirits that are in the painting, in the mandala, around you in 3 dimensions. And holding on to that's incredibly difficult, right? It takes time, it takes practice. This is why you can't just, pick up a book and get to the deepest levels of that practice, because it takes time. It takes, most people don't have the visualization capacity to do that. You can get it, but it takes practice, right? And it takes instruction. You do things, things are done. You can learn it in sort of in stages. You build it up over time. And then you can, in meditation, sit in this amazing 3D temple, and it has this profound effect on your consciousness. Yeah, it is. It is an amazing experience. Or with Vajrakilaya, it's terrifying. um, not all deities are what we might consider beautiful. Some of them are wrathful. And Vajrakilaya is temple in particular is mandala is covered. I don't want to be too gross, but we'll say covered with remains, with like human remains. Like it's pretty gross. And you have to imagine yourself. And part of that is to overcome fear and disgust and reactiveness to these things. You're imagining sometimes these horrible things that you're sitting in the middle of, with these wrathful, frightening beings around you. Part of that is to get over your fear of death. Part of it, a small part of it. But yeah, it's a pretty amazing. It's a pretty amazing experience. But I've had, yeah, yeah. No, it's it's not all it's not all rainbows and sunlight and that sort of thing. There are, and it's not demonic. It's not evil. It's not. It's wrathful, right? So in some systems you have wrathful aspects, even in Christianity, right? Like in the Bible, God sends a flood and wipes out the whole planet, right? So in Buddhism and Hinduism and many other systems, there are wrathful deities. They are fierce, and they're there to help us. They're still there to help us. They're help us to, to be, to get stronger. They're help us to be powerful, help us to. They're used a lot in things like exorcism and things like that. There's a story. Jason Miller, who's an author I like a whole lot, and I think I own all his books. I've taken some courses from him. I actually studied Vajrakilaya with him. But one of the symbols of Kali, Kali is a mother goddess who is also wrathful and destructive. So one of the symbols of Vajrakilaya is the dorje. The dorje is a thunderbolt dagger. So it's a dagger. It's a 3-pointed dagger that comes down to a sharp point. And you might have seen, and it has a thunderbolt symbol, a dorje on the top of it. You hold this in meditation and you empower it, and there's all kinds of things that go on. And one of the stories he talks about was like he kind of got himself in over the head. Somebody's like, "Oh, we're having all this, poltergeist activity happening in our home," and he's like, "I'll take care of this." Anytime there's hubris, you can really get in over your head with these things. So he goes into the home, and he's just instantly like overwhelmed, in over his head, that sort of thing. And he's like, "What am I gonna do? I told these people I was gonna help them, and I don't know what to do." And he walks in with the purba. It's the dagger is actually called the purba. It has a dorje on top of it. The purba, this magical dagger. He walks in with this. Now it is a dagger, but it is also a spike, like a nail, and it's meant to, when used in exorcism and traditional rites, it's meant to, like, you nail the spirit down so they can't get away, and then you dispel them. So he walks in, and all the doors in the house that were open slammed shut, and this is the story anyway, and the being or beings or whatever, like, cleared out. But this was a purba. Like, you can't just like go buy a purba and have it be. It's not a magical implement in itself. Nothing is that. Nothing works that way. It had been through empowerments and blessings and all of these things. So it's gathering. I'll talk about, not in this live, but sometime in the future I'll talk about creating your own sacred objects, creating magical objects, and how that kind of works. But there's this idea, for me anyway, this is how I think about it, is that, if you've ever done that experiment, like when you were a kid and you took like a nail, like an iron nail, and you took a magnet and you rubbed it in the same direction across the nail, and the nail eventually becomes magnetized, right? Because you're aligning the ions in the nail using the other magnet. So you can magnetize something using another magnet, or you can use an electromagnet to do it really, really quickly. I'll never forget, when I was in college, I did. There were two radio stations at my college, and I worked at both of them. And we had a. This is back in the day when we had tapes, these carts, not the same tapes that you put in like a tape player, but we had these like carts with songs on them that you stuck into a cart machine. And we had a bulk eraser for those. Like you could stack up 12 of these things, and it was a huge electromagnet, and you would turn it on, and it would pulse, and it would erase all the tapes. And a fun thing to do was to set that on top of a metal filing cabinet and turn it on, and it would shake the entire filing cabinet. Anyway, so magical objects are like that. You use them in ritual, you empower them, you do this, you do that, and you're essentially over time imbuing them um, with the power that you're putting into them. So like prayer beads, like all kinds of magical tools in Wicca and other forms of witchcraft, and in Western ceremonial magic. Actually, this comes from Western ceremonial magic, but it was borrowed into Wicca from the Golden Dawn tradition. You have the magical implements of the dagger, the wand, the cup, and the disc or the pentacle, which are the suits of the tarot. And those are considered elemental tools or elemental weapons, but they aren't just that because they exist. You don't just buy a dagger and say this is a magical dagger. It has to go through ritual. And the more you use something in a sacred way, sort of the more energy, the more consciousness energy that it picks up. And so the more sacred it becomes. But this is the same thing if um, an object that has been in a place where there's lots of fighting or lots of bad energy, that sort of thing, can carry the energy of that. So I tell people, like, be careful about the antiques that you buy and bring into your home. How often do I come across darker entities myself? Have you used the tools? Um, so this is a good question. I don't run into darker entities that much, with a couple of exceptions, right? Now, that's different, I guess, than what we'd consider like stuck spirits. There are stuck spirits. There are humans that pass on in a way that they become stuck here and they're not meant to be here. Those aren't really dark entities. Those aren't really like beings that are maleficent, necessarily Maleficent. That's the character. That are like bad actors. They can cause problems for sure, but it's sort of like the idea of the toddler who's throwing a tantrum. They're trying to get something, or they're unhappy, or they're stuck, or whatever. It's like a stuck animal, right? We don't consider like a tiger isn't evil, but a tiger is dangerous, right? Because a tiger does what a tiger is doing. And it's the same thing with different types of entities as well. There are entities that can be harmful, and there are entities that are drawn. In my experience, there are entities that are drawn to situations in which the energy is really, really bad. And they feed off of that. They feed they're not, it's not evil for the sake of evil. They're doing harm because they get something out of it. They get something out of the emotional energy, or they get something, variously. So there have been a couple times. There have been a few times. One, I have a client who is on the receiving end of lots and lots of curse energy from somebody they were in a long-term relationship with, who that's what they're doing to get back at this person. That's what they're doing for revenge. And that's a place where I run into sort of harmful entities. I don't really love the distinction like dark entities, light entities. I mean, we can look at, there's a spectrum of spiritual beings out there. Some of them don't really care about interacting with humans that much. Some of them don't like humans that much. Some of them will cause harm, not out of maliciousness, but just because, again, it's like a tiger. A tiger would be harmful, but it's not malicious, right? Mosquitoes, very harmful, not malicious. They're trying to get they're trying to get your blood so they can feed their babies. But they cause a lot of harm. They cause bloodborne diseases and all kinds of stuff, and itchiness and that sort of thing. Um, and so we might want to banish mosquitoes from you. Use bug spray or citronella or whatever. Um, so there's only been a couple times where I have run into like entities that were attracted to dark energy that was the result of human activity, quite frankly. A couple years back, I was called into a very large home, very large, like 15,000 square feet. Somebody had lived there previously who was involved in uh, some child abuse, some very serious child, child stuff that I won't go into. Um, but a very wealthy, politically connected individual who had been traveling overseas and got caught with images on their computer and had thousands and thousands of things. And so there's lots of stuff. And then talking to people who knew this person previously, that somebody had owned the home previously, and it was the new homeowners who were like, "You got to come in here. Like, this is bad. I feel really like I can't even walk into this place and feel okay." Which is just terrible. What a terrible situation when you have a new home. Um, so there in my work in that home, I ran into an entity that was there, that was drawn there because of the human activity that was going on. I worked on an old inn that had formerly been a brothel, like in the 19th century on the seashore. So it was like a brothel for sailors. There was a lot going on there, a lot of stuff going on there, a lot of really unhappy, abusive, violent energy happening in that space, and that sometimes can draw beings because certain beings can use that as food. Basically, they draw off of it, and so that is attractive to people. Sometimes I will find entities attached to people. It is not like the exorcists. Usually it's just causing certain types of problems with people. Causing maladies of certain types, and 99.9% of the time, that is just parasitic. They're just feeding off of the person. They're not trying to get a person. However, there's a really interesting, I'll talk about this. I realize I've gone way off topic, but that's really typical for me anyway. There's a really interesting situation. It wasn't something I was working on. A person who I was dating and I decided to go spend a weekend in Salem, Massachusetts. And Salem is a very touristy city. If you've never been to Salem, Massachusetts, it's where the witch trials were held. The famous ones. There were other witch trials. I had an ancestor that was jailed, never executed, but jailed for witchcraft, eventually let go, thank goodness, because this body and mind wouldn't exist. Hi, Kristen, who is open to spirit. Very nice to see you. So anyway, this girlfriend that I had and I went to Salem, Massachusetts for the weekend. We did all the touristy stuff. We took the tour bus around and we walked around a lot. And we ate a lot of great food and had some cocktails and did stuff, whatever. And we went into one thing about Salem that I like is that it's been sort of taken over by people who are actually practicing witchcraft. Now, the witch trials were not about people who were actually practicing witchcraft. It was mostly about neighbors turning on neighbors and people trying to take other people's land. That was it. And they killed, a bunch of people. One person by crushing to death with stones. And I've been there. I've been where that happened, and it was a really interesting curse that was laid at that time against the sheriffs in Salem. There used to be a sheriff of Salem. That position no longer exists. But every single sheriff for 300 years either died young in office or had to leave because they contracted some mysterious disease. Since that happened. Really, really interesting. I mean, horrible, but really interesting case. So anyway, we're in Salem. We're doing all this tourist stuff, whatever. We go into, there's a lot of shops. There are a lot of occult and witchy shops. There are lots of places to get tarot cards read. There are lots of um, spooky things, really cool. Like, I like spooky stuff. I like Halloween, all that stuff. So we were walking around on the main drag. I think it's Essex Street, and there are lots of shops, tourist shops, t-shirt shops, shops that sell, witchy supplies and statues and all kinds of stuff. So we were in this tourist shop. It was, they sold everything. They sold statues of Jesus and statues of Baphomet and statues of, jewelry and stuff to hang on your wall and candles and incense. And, it was just this mishmash of all of this crazy stuff. And it was kind of fun. And the woman I was dating at that time, we were looking around, and she saw, like, hanging high up on this wall was a set of wind chimes that she really liked. I think they had like brass bells on them. It was a really pretty set of wind chimes. And she was like looking up on this, and this guy comes out of the back room. This guy who works there or owns the store or whatever, he comes out of the back room at a very fast pace. He's walking, almost running out of the store, and he's looking at the ground as he comes out. And as he passes by, he does not even glance at what my girlfriend is looking at, but he says, "I've got another one of those up front," and like goes and reaches up and grabs something from a shelf that he's not even looking at and pulls out, and it is the exact set of stuff, right? It's the exact wind chimes that she was looking at, but it was another one that had been up front, not the one that was hanging on the wall decoratively. And she got a little freaked out. And I am not necessarily clairvoyant, although I sometimes pick up on things, but I'm seeing stuff going on with this guy. And I can tell that he is not looking through his own eyes. He's seeing things, he's seeing everything around him and knowing what people are looking at and all of these things, but not looking through his own eyes at all. He's looking down at the ground and seeing what's going on up here. How does that happen? And that is a really strong indicator for me, often, of what I would call a possessing being. He had a being that was really, really attached to him. And my take on it was, I don't 100% know, because I don't work on people without their explicit permission. And I didn't have permission. I'm just getting my take from encountering this person. And so we checked out, and my girlfriend was freaked out by the whole experience. She's like, "What was going on with that guy? That was the weirdest, encounter I've ever had with somebody." I go, "Here's a guy who's in the back of his shop. He's got all of these books on, Solomonic work and all of this stuff on summoning spirits and, whatever. He's got access to candles and incense and all this stuff. He's doing rituals in the back. He's pulling beings in from another dimension, basically another reality. He's pulling being, and one of them has attached itself to him and decided it's going to get a free ride in this world and act through him. And in return, like, he's getting the ability to see things that he's not looking at." And so oftentimes when people have a possessing being like that, it is not necessarily like it's a parasitic relationship, but it's not just causing them harm. It's not like The Exorcist, where this kid is like head spinning around and spinning up pea soup and all that sort of thing. It's actually giving him clairvoyant abilities, because it's like feeding into his visual cortex stuff that it's seeing, which is sometimes beyond the human ability to see. So that can happen sometimes. I've seen that. I've also I was giving a talk on shamanism, a public talk on shamanism one time, and these two people came in, a man and a woman. I thought they were a couple at first. I know it was just an assumption, but it turns out it was brother and sister. They were not acting romantic. It wasn't gross or anything like that. It was just this brother and sister came in, and because they walked in together and they were about the same age and male and female, I assumed they were a couple. I don't know why, but they weren't. Doesn't matter. And this guy, when he walked in, I could hear a buzzing sound, and I could see spiritually. I could see, and I wasn't reading him. I wasn't in trance or anything. I could see stuff, little beings, almost like little insects, just flying around his head. And I'm like, what is going on with this guy? And so I chatted, like he came up to me and talked to me after the talk, and I talked about shamanism. And I don't use plant medicine. I don't use substances to journey. Um and I talked to this, so I was talking about that. I was talking about journeying using drums and rattles and that sort of thing. And he's like, I've done everything under the sun. He had this whole like he had this whole list of he had done every plant medicine, every chemical, every psychedelic you can imagine. He'd done it all. And I said, yeah, I can tell. So what he had done was he had blown him through repeated use of these things, and not probably really informed use, not using them under the tutelage of plant medicine specialist or whatever. He had blown his doors wide open, basically. He had left the barn doors wide open and had attracted a bunch of little beings that were just buzzing around his head. And I could tell like his eyes were kind of glazed over. He had like a 1,000-yard stare. He was probably getting a crap ton of information coming in that he couldn't even process. So sometimes this can lead to psychotic breaks or that sort of thing. It's a little bit dangerous, and it's one of the reasons why I don't mess with that stuff too much, or at all, actually. Would that be symbiotic though? If he was willing for the entity to stay, could you order it out, or is that too simplistic view? Um, yeah, I mean it's a good question. Is it symbiotic? Are they both getting something from it? Sure. Yeah. Um, could you just order it out? Maybe, maybe not. It depends. It might require some work to get it to leave if it was really entrenched. I've had some struggles. I had the very first time I ever did what we call depossession. I don't do exorcism. I do what's called depossession. The very first time I ever did it, fortunately, I was doing it with my teacher sitting next to me, and the person I was doing it with, for on behalf of, started choking, like physically choking, and my teacher had to step in and help. And it's not an easy thing, and it's something that many practitioners I know of are like, I won't even mess with that. I'm not even I'm not even dealing with that. It's like too frightening, too scary. Is it symbiotic? I mean, they're both getting something out of it, but my personal take is I want to be sovereign. Like I merge with helping spirits and then I unmerge when I'm done. And I want to be sitting in my own spirit and have my own power and all of those things. I don't want something, whether or not I've had an agreement with it. I don't know if there was an agreement. That can certainly happen. I don't know if you saw my comment, but do you let people join the live? Um, Generally, I mean, you mean like as a co-host kind of thing? Generally, I have not done that. Um, I've done it once or twice, but so once in a while. Once in a while. Um, an interesting topic would be types of entities, like things like this to nature spirits, all the different spirits. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. I mean, obviously, there's such a variety of spiritual beings out there that I personally don't know what they all are. couldn't catalog them all. I do have a list of something like 200 different names of nature spirits from different cultures that I just collect over time, keep on my laptop. Like to ask questions and learn and share experiences if I can join. Um, yeah, so generally speaking, when I'm going live and presenting, just talking about a topic like that, I don't, I don't do it. It's hard because I've got more than one live channel going on, and so I'm also simultaneously talking to Facebook and YouTube. And if I brought you on through TikTok, like nobody would hear your side of the conversation. So, but I do have the ability to do that on other channels on Facebook and YouTube Live to bring other people on and have it viewed by the different channels, but not through TikTok. So, if I were just on TikTok, it's a possibility, but um, it's also a little like sometimes it's a little risky bringing. I'm not saying you're risky, but sometimes it's a little risky bringing other people on that I don't know. Um, you know, um, but thank you for your thanks for the feedback and the input. But yeah, I'll definitely, as we get into spooky season, we're getting close to spooky season. I think any month ending with BER is spooky season. So I would include, November and December in spooky season as well. Um but most people just think October, like Halloween month, but I think September through December, definitely spooky season. At least it is here. Once the leaves start dying off the trees. And I took a really great photo of a really gnarly, it was a dead tree, unfortunately, but I was on an island, which is a state park, yesterday, and took a really cool picture. One of the things I love about the coast and well, living where I live, where there's such a diversity of environments. So I don't live that close to the coast, but I can go to the coast, and the trees are different. They grow different close to the coast. Oh, thank you for joining. Thank you for becoming a member. I appreciate that. Been doing shamanic June. Oh, with Sandra Ingerman. Yeah. So Sandra is my teacher's teacher. So Sandra is like my grandmother in shamanism. I mean, it sounds weird because there's not that much of an age difference where she would be my grandmother, like in real life. But as far as teaching lineages go, at least one of my main teachers is Sandra Ingerman's direct student and a teacher under Sandra Ingerman. Okay. In my own experience, intelligence and material. From the intelligence optimizing forms comes an intellect, which seems like intelligence projected through material form. That may be too intellectual for me to get my brain around. I think I'm pretty smart, but I'm not sure I completely understand. But it seems like you have definitely put some thought into that. So that's pretty cool. I appreciate that. By the way, I will mention this as well. Right now, I am trying out a new community on the school platform. It's not open to the public yet. I wanted to get some content in there. I wanted to get a few people. I have about 10 people in there right now that I've invited in. I'm not sure whether or not I'll be doing journeying in there or not with people, but I will be doing live events through there. There will be courses offered through there, that if you're a member, you'll just get the courses, kind of thing. And so I'm doing different topics and that sort of thing. And I'm trying to figure out when it does go live to the general public, like what the price point will be. I'm trying to keep it like really affordable, but I also have to cover like it costs money to host these things, and would be nice if I'm putting a tremendous amount of time into it to have something come from that as well. So, but I'm trying to keep it affordable, but not so that it like people also don't take it seriously, right? People are just like, this doesn't matter, kind of thing. How do you become a member of this new community? I'll when it's ready to go live, I will make announcements about that. It'll be soon though. Spiritual and physical are the same thing as intelligence and matter, and intellect is ego. I think I have different terminologies. I does that fit? I think spirit and matter are different frequencies of the same thing. So I think it fits. I have a different definition of ego, I think, than intellect. Intellect, I think, is about our ability to think and process information, where ego is a collection of ideas and beliefs we have about who we are as individuals. So if I say I am a 52-year-old man who lives in Maine, who practices shamanism, who owns a dog, who has two kids, blah, 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 right? It's like a collection of ideas about who I am. That's ego to me. And that is a way of me differentiating this body and mind from your body and mind. Spiritually, underneath it all, I think we're all the same thing. I think we're all one being. That's my take on it. I mean, that's my experience. That's my personal gnosis. Oh, thank you so much. It'll be soon. What I'm trying to do is have enough content and members on there so that there is interaction. I mean, it's a community, right? It's people are supposed to converse and have, input and all of those things. And so it'll be very soon. I think I'm gonna I should be I'm going to have my first class up today, which will be about shadow work, which people will get through. The way that the platform works is pretty cool. It's kind of gamified. So you have different levels. So when you just join, you're like level 1, and you get to level 2 by interacting, which is really cool. It encourages interaction. So you get to level 2 by like commenting and liking and interacting with people. And so there'll be courses and things that get unlocked at the different level. You don't have to pay more. Like that'll be the thing. Like it's not that you don't pay more. You just you earn your way into courses and things by unlocking. So I want to make it make sense for everybody, and that sort of thing. That's how you mean intellect. Okay, so I just think we have different definitions for that word, but I think I understand what you're saying. I think so anyway. But like I said, so I kind of the whole point of this is that we have different experiences of reality because we have different biology. We use different terminology for the same things or different things. We have all of these things. We all have different perspectives on things. And I think that's really beautiful, actually. I think that is, if we can get around wanting everybody to see things from our perspective, which is technically impossible, I think we'll have a better experience. I think we'll have a beautiful experience of this world. And if you look, there's something I call OQS, observable quality of source, right? You might think of source as God or the universe or the oversoul or whatever term you want to use, whatever term makes the most sense to you. If you want to know what source is like, look around and observe. And one of the things I observe when I look around is amazing infinite diversity, right? Every human being, every individual human being on this planet, every individual animal, every individual plant is different. Are there similarities? Yes. But are there big differences and little differences in the way we perceive things? All of our realities are different. How beautiful is that? That's incredibly beautiful, right? This is why we have things like art and music that make our lives more fulfilling, right? And not all art. I've got a cool, I'll try to show you. I've got this cool painting on the wall behind me. I don't know who made it. It's a samurai cutting a piñata in half, right? And candy's falling out of the piñata. It's one of my favorite paintings. Here, I'll show you on TikTok too. I don't know who painted it. It's one of my favorite pieces. It almost looks like a Banksy painting, right? It is signed, but I can't read the signature. It's like too illegible to read the signature. But I just think it's really cool. But that might not be your cup of tea. You might like pictures of dogs playing poker. I like pictures of dogs playing poker. I don't know, right? That might not be your cup of tea, but that's okay. That's all right. We have different taste in things. You might look at that painting and go, man, that is gaudy. I would never hang that in my home. And that's okay. That's cool. It's great. You don't have to like the things that I like. You don't have to believe the things that I believe. You don't have to see things the way that I see things. You don't have to use the same definitions for things. For us to communicate, there has to be some overlap, some common understanding. And most of the time, we can come to that. There was an interesting thing that I saw recently. I can't remember if it was on TikTok or YouTube or where it was, but it was a linguist that I follow. I follow a number of linguists because language, I think, is really interesting to me. But he was saying that every single person who speaks a language, so everybody who speaks English will say, because that's the language I'm speaking, uses it in a completely idiomatic way, meaning the way that I speak English is not the way anybody else on this planet speaks English. Nobody uses the exact words that I use in the exact way that I use them. So basically, everybody on this planet, even though we may be mutually intelligible, we may be able to understand each other when we speak English, every person on this planet is speaking their own language. I think that's amazing. I think that's really cool. And an example of that is, if you remember the Unabomber, right? This Ted Kaczynski, I think was his name, right? The Unabomber. The way he got caught is that he wrote a manifesto. He typed a manifesto, and they published it in a newspaper. I can't remember if it was the New York Times or what it was, but they published his manifesto. And his brother read the manifesto and said, "This is my brother. This is how my brother talks. It's so unique. It's so individual that I recognize this writing. This is my brother. This is how he speaks." And called the FBI, and that's how they caught him. Right? His language was so unique. But so is yours, and so is mine. Right? Nobody speaks exactly like me. Nobody speaks exactly like you. Even though you can hopefully understand me and I can hopefully understand you when we speak the same language, we're not using it in exactly the same way. That's part of this, that blows my mind a little bit, right? How many, several billion people on this planet, I don't know how many, speak English to some extent. Maybe not as their native language, but many, many people speak English. And they definitely don't use it in the same way. I spent a lot of time in years gone by in the Philippines, for example. Most people in the Philippines speak English. It's taught in school from a very early age. The Philippines was essentially under U.S. control for a very long time. There were U.S. military bases in the Philippines for a long time. So most people there speak English. But it's very different. It's very different than the English that's spoken in the US. But you can still understand everybody, and they can understand you if you're speaking English. But of course, it's influenced by their native language. It's influenced by Tagalog and whatever other native language they might speak. One of the things I always thought was really cool is how many languages people speak over there. I was married to somebody from the Philippines, which is why I spent so much time there. And my mother-in-law had grown up in the Philippines, but lived in Europe for many years and spoke, I don't know how many languages. So she spoke Tagalog and Ilocano because she was from Ilocos, which is a region in the Philippines, different language. She spoke Spanish, Italian, German, and English. I can barely speak English. I can, get by as a tourist sometimes in a French-speaking area. I would not say I have any sort of fluency there. I've picked up little bits of other languages as I have, spent time in a place where they're not speaking English. But to have that amount of the ability to communicate with different people, and that has got to change how you think about things. Our way of thinking is very influenced by our language and the language that we use, but also the way that we think is reflected in the way that we use language, right? I find it very telling. This was somebody who was a lawyer. I'm trying to remember what the context was. They were like a government lawyer or something like that, and they told me that when they're interviewing somebody, when they're questioning somebody who is suspected of a crime or something like that, very often when somebody is guilty, they will use passive voice to distance themselves from the crime that they're talking about. So they're like, instead of saying like, um, I pushed so and so, they'll say so and so was pushed, right? They remove the actor from the act because they're the actor, because they don't want to seem responsible, right? Um, and this will show up in a courtroom, this will show up in questioning, that sort of thing. So it's very interesting. And I've noticed that very often when I'm working with somebody who, when I'm working like in a coaching sort of situation or a client sort of situation, and somebody is not taking responsibility for their action, they will often speak in a very passive way about what's going on in their lives, right? This happened to me, not I did this and this was the result, kind of thing. Sometimes that's something I coach people through. Like, okay, so what did you do? Not to blame people, not to victim blame or blame people for their misfortune or that sort of thing. But I've had talk to somebody who's financially struggling, and they're like, oh, when the money comes in, I'm going to do this. When the money comes in, um, I'm like, what do you mean when the money comes in? Like, what are you doing to go earn the money or get the money or whatever? Oh, I don't know. I don't know. It's just this idea, and there is some. It's not like they're doing manifestation work around money, which I've done, somewhat successfully in my life. It's not that. It's this hopefulness. It's just like I can't take responsibility for what, like, this painful situation in my life. So I'm going to make money the actor in this situation, and money is going to come into my life. Not I'm going to draw money into my life, or I'm going to do manifestation work, or I'm going to go work, or I'm going to open a business, or I'm going to promote myself, or what have you. None of those things. So I noticed that when people are using language, I notice the language that people choose in relationships, right? That will very often belie what's going on in a relationship. Something to pay attention to when you're speaking with people. What kind of language are they using around what they're describing? Don't just take everything at face value. Understand, like, notice when somebody is using passive voice in a situation. They're often distancing. There's I'm trying to think of the linguistic term. There's something called like it's this isn't the correct term, so don't beat me up over this. There's something called the lost performative or the lost performer. It's when you're describing something and the performer, the one doing the action, is missing from what you're describing, right? When you're talking about this. One of the ones that would always bug me is people will use the word they. They told me I could do this, or they said this, or here's one that's used in politics right now. Good morning to you. One that's used in politics is like, many people are saying. Many people are saying, which may be true, but that doesn't mean that what comes out, like, that is an appeal. That's an illogical appeal. Many people are saying this person is lousy. Sure, you can find that for anybody, right? I could find 3 people and that think somebody is lousy, and say many people are saying this person is lousy. Even if that's a true statement, it means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. Like, you're like, whatever comes after that is meaningless. Trump uses Norman Vincent Peale positive thinking, not so different from Joel Osteen's prosperity gospel. I don't know that much about either one of those things, so I can't comment on that. But I will say that, when I see politicians, and I'm not picking on any one particular politician. This is the way that This is the way that it happens. Politicians get media training. They never answer like, you'll notice interviews with politicians from everywhere. Um, they never they don't give you the answer to the question that's been asked. They give you the answer that they want to give you, and sometimes it's not even to the question they've asked. Like, what do you think about, you know, what do you think about the price of oil? Well, I just want to say it's great to be here. They'll start off with some stuff to try to make you forget about the question that was, it's really great to be here. Thank you for having me. Blah, blah, blah. It's really great to be here on this Sunday morning. And, we're thinking about all of these things. And the war in Gaza is really, really crazy. And that wasn't the question that they were asked. They're going to spout whatever their agenda is. And it is very rare that a journalist in the society, because you will get your access removed if you try to do this. It's very rare that a journalist in the society will follow it up and say, "You didn't answer my question. Let me repeat it. What is your opinion about the price of oil," or whatever it is. Yeah, it's beyond deflection 101. It's that I, like, as a politician, I have an agenda, and I am going to speak about my agenda. So, like, pay attention to that, but also pay attention to that in non-political conversations. When you're having a conversation with a loved one, I had a very I had a relationship that wound up being quite abusive, both mentally and physically abusive, that I'm so grateful to be out of years ago. And um, one of the things that was really frustrating for me were the disagreements. We would say, the disagreement would be like, you said this to me, and I really upset me when you said this to me, when said this about me. And they would say, like, how dare you say that the sky is blue, right? It wasn't even what we were talking about. And that became so overwhelmingly frustrating to me, that anything I said, that I was like, you said this thing to me, and it just felt like, it really hurt my feelings, or, whatever. How dare you say that I didn't pick up my shoes? I'm like, I didn't say that. That wasn't what we were talking. Like, that's not an exaggeration. That's how these conversations went. And I should have paid attention earlier, but did not. But we live and learn, right? I should have paid attention that was the communication dynamic that was happening in this relationship. It got really bad. It got to the point where I started recording, like, with knowledge of the other person. I'm like, if we got into a disagreement, I would set a voice recorder down and turn it on. And I'm like, what's that for? I'm like, well, because every time we have a disagreement, you tell me either I say things that I didn't say, or vice versa, that I didn't say things that I did say. And so I need to have a recording of this so that I'm not going crazy. Could be malicious, or possibly a form of psychosis. I think it was more of the latter, to be honest. I think this person is mentally unwell, undiagnosed, and not getting the help that she needed. And I do have compassion for that. I have compassion for that. It was very destructive to me. Could it have been fixed? In the relationship, I don't know. I think for it to be fixed, this person would have had to seek help and potentially been, I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist or anything. There may have been some necessary medication, perhaps some antipsychotic medication or something like that. That might have been, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. It was a pretty serious situation. One of being very serious situation. She wound up becoming violent towards the end of it, and that was, not something I could have in my life, for sure. Anyway, but that is long story to long personal story to talk about paying attention to this stuff pay attention to what people leave out. And when they're talking about things, like, I can't describe everything in excruciating detail when I'm talking to somebody about something, but what we leave out is telling, right? If we are, if I'm trying to apologize for something and say, I'm sorry, I said this to you and I was not thinking and it was a hurtful statement and I know that it hurt you and I apologize. I apologize for what I said and I apologize that it hurt you. That's an apology, right? But what many people will say was like, I'm sorry that you were hurt by what I said. Okay, but that doesn't mean you're sorry for what you said, and that's a different thing. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm very happy to be in a better space as well. Nobody should ever have to go through that. But I'll say this, and I think it's important to I think this it's important to point this out only because I brought it up, and I don't want to just leave it there. Um, and I'll talk about it in more detail in another talk. But I'll give trigger warnings and stuff. So I grew up. One of the reasons why I came into my spirituality is that I grew up in a very abusive household. I grew up with an alcoholic father who was violent. It was severe. It was at times life threatening. It was a pretty effed up situation that nobody should ever live through. Nobody ever, for any reason whatsoever, should ever be in that situation. Especially not children. That creates wounds. That creates, PTSD, psychospiritual wounds, like serious wounding. And though I have done tremendous amount of work on myself over the years and done my best to heal and have made significant progress in my life, I live symptom free pretty much. I was in a really bad shape earlier in my life. There's still unhealed stuff there. So oftentimes we get into what we call karmic relationships, right? We get into these relationships with people where we're repeating patterns. We're exposing ourselves to the same wounds that we had from childhood or from earlier relationships or whatever. And my take on that is, like, while that situation was terrible and I wouldn't want to repeat it, and I don't want anybody else to ever have to go through that, it was important for me. It was important for me to experience that because it brought up old unhealed wounding that I needed to take care of, that I needed to work on, that I'm still working on. I'm still working on to this day. Thank you. Going back to UPG, spiritual teachings are based on old books like the Solomon Keys, the Eddas, the Bible. If writers have UPG with gods today, that's the future teachings, potentially, right? Potentially. So, yeah, a lot of these things, a lot of these writings. There's a great book if you're into reading, and it's a very thick book. I'm not even through it yet. Called John Dee and the Empire of Angels. It's written by Jason Louv. Really fantastic book about John Dee. John Dee, along with Edward Kelly, spent something like 9 years in communication with angels. They're calling them angels, getting information. In fact, even transcribed a language, which is now called Enochian, but it was, their presentation of it was, this was the first language. This was the language that the angels spoke to Adam in the Garden of Eden, whatever. It's in the time, this is Elizabethan England. In the time, it was very heavily influenced by the Christianity of the time. So you need to understand that as well. But this was never shared with anyone. It was only posthumously that Dee's works were published. A lot of this stuff is lost because the story is that his a maid working in the household found a trunk full of documents and used some of them to line pie tins. So some of this UPG that these men were having, they wrote down everything. So you can go to the British, you'd have to get special access permission, but you can go to the British Library and find the books of John Dee. You can go to the British Museum and see the scrying mirror that they used. It's a black obsidian mirror. They've even located where using chemical testing or whatever, they've located where the mirror came from. So so a lot of spiritual teachings, including that of the Bible, are based on UPG, right? Peter on the road to Damascus has essentially what we would call a seizure today, falls down, has a vision of Jesus, and then gets up and writes about it, and that becomes books, books of the Bible. So whether or not people's UPGs today become future spiritual teachings, it depends on whether they're adopted by other people, right? But there certainly is that. So a good example of this, I think, if you look at some of the modern neo-pagan traditions, right? So I'll pick on heathenry a little bit. So if you don't know, heathenry is usually referring to people who are doing worship or ritual in the style of the ancient Norse. And I say in the style of because we don't know necessarily what those rituals, what those beliefs were. We have writings, but they came from the post-Christian era. So all of the Eddas and that sort of thing were written down by Christians in that time. So they are looking at those things through various lenses, right? All of the stories of whatever, but we don't necessarily know how individual people worshipped and interacted with the deities of that time. We know there were sacrifices, we know there were temples, we have some archaeological stuff that we know is going on, but all of that now is kind of reconstructed, and people do, including myself, do work with that pantheon in trance and altered states. I do work in Norse shamanism, study Norse shamanism, practice it to some extent, and it's called Norse shamanism. That's almost a misnomer as well. There's not a better term for it. Save is one thing, but there's a whole body of work around that, around save. We know what save is. We have descriptions of it from people even in practicing it in Ireland. When the Vikings were in Ireland, we have descriptions of that. And we can practice, but it's reconstruction. But a lot of reconstruction can happen through UPG. Now, whether other people adopt that, right? So again, there were lots and lots of at the beginning of Christianity, the first couple centuries of Christianity, there were many competing texts. There wasn't a Bible in the beginning, right? Yeah, you had the Hebrew Bible that became part of the Christian Bible, but there was not a Christian Bible in the beginning of Christianity, not until the 4th century. So 400 years after Jesus died was the first time that they assembled a bunch of books into what we now know as the Bible. They decided what was going to be canon. And what they did was amongst other things that they did is they sent people around to the different churches throughout the area where people were practicing Christianity throughout the Roman Empire and said, what books are you using? Oh, we've got these 4 gospels. They don't all agree with each other, but whatever. And like, okay, we'll include those, right? And then we've got these other books. So the New Testament was sort of put together, and there were a whole bunch of books, probably hundreds, we don't even know all of them, that were tossed out. They're like, okay, we're not including these because not enough people are using them, or they don't support our political position, or whatever. They got tossed out. Some of them we have. Some of them we have because they were preserved in codexes. So we have like the Nag Hammadi library and things like that we're fine. And we have other gospels. We have the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Judas, the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel, so these other gospels, but they're not in the Bible. They're not included in that. And sometimes those are called Gnostic texts, and sometimes they're not. So could people now who are having unverified personal gnosis and with deities and writing about it create future spiritual systems? Absolutely. It happens all the time. It happens and like I'm going to use this term in the loosest sense, but it happens with cults a lot. And a cult isn't, and it's important to draw this distinction between the cult as a new religious movement and a dangerous cult. Very often we have the idea of like all cults are dangerous. Not all cults are dangerous cults. They're just some new religious movements. And what, a dangerous cult is like, charismatic leader takes people away from their family. They have their own inner language. They have, this and that and this and that. There's a bunch of features that make something a dangerous cult. But a new religious movement, sometimes referred to as a cult, isn't necessarily um, isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? Like just because it's a new religious movement. So it could, absolutely could happen. It could be based on UPG with gods and goddesses. There's a lot of stuff starting probably in the 60s. There are, and I don't know, I don't know enough about this and I'm not, again, like I'm not here to like, I'm not putting down anybody's belief system or whatever gets you through the day. But there are these UFO cults, right? There are these people who, purport to have communication with alien species and have formed religions around that, formed fairly large religious movements around that. And it's usually based on like a leader who has supposed communication with these on a spiritual basis. And so that can become a spiritual movement. And that, might be a future teaching. Whether that is widely adopted or not remains to be seen. If if the aliens land and say that guy was full of it, that might cause some damage to his movement. Or if they land and go, oh yeah, we've been talking to this guy for 50 years, that might change things as well. So it's always interesting to me to see the adoption of spiritual systems and how that happened. With Christianity, with Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, with the Abrahamic religions, it was basically by force. If you lived there, if you lived in the region where this religion was practiced, you practiced that religion and no other. Like that was by decree. Stop being an agnostic, atheist, bro, and accept Christ. I am none of those things. You're still yapping, dude. Okay, well, I don't know why you're interested in listening to me if you think I'm yapping, but I blocked you so you don't have to listen to me anymore. How's that? And the same thing, like when we see religion adopted regionally, it's usually because the leader of an area, a king or whatever, adopts that religion. There were societies that were very pluralistic. There were places in the ancient world where they were very accepting of whomever, and just viewed them as as different, and that's fine. But a lot of that stuff is came in through force or whatever. So anyway, I have been talking for 2 hours and 15 minutes. This is by far the longest live I've ever done. I need to take a break. It's definitely been an interesting conversation with all of you. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for those who spent so much time with me this morning. I definitely love and appreciate all of you. And I will